Right. Hey, Omaha, Millard, Fremont. Glad you guys are all here. Millard and Fremont, love you guys. Heard you guys had an awesome week last week. A ton of kids showed up at those campuses. Great to see the energy happening already between all three of these campuses. But tonight, I just want you guys to ask somebody around you. Actually, not even ask them. I want you to tell somebody around you, what is the scariest place you can imagine being trapped? Go ahead, tell somebody on your right or on your left. Trunk of a car, closet, dungeon, I don't know. Millard, Fremont, share, talk to each other for a minute. School, that'd be a scary place to be trapped, yeah. Let me hear some of you guys shout out some answers. Millard, Fremont, you can shout out some answers to Adam or Jamie. What do you think? Scariest place, what? A unicorn's den. All right, yeah, scary. Yeah, scary. Hell. Wow, yeah. Okay. That'd be a terrible place to be trapped. Yeah, CJ. Standing in the ocean. That would be a horrible. Oh, stranded, like on an island, like trapped on an island, on a boat. Yeah, that'd be terrible. Yeah. All right, that's pretty good. Millard, Fremont, I'm sure you guys had some great creative answers there. For me, I've been trapped in different places before. In college, we would get like 7 or 8 of us. We were all like this tight group of friends, and we thought it was a good idea to all travel together in just a regular sedan that only seated 5. And so 2 of us would get into the trunk. We had to draw straws for who had to do that. I don't recommend it. It wasn't very safe. And it was really claustrophobic, really just a horrible experience. But it was just, that's what we would do sometimes. And it felt like you were trapped in there. One time when Harper was 2, maybe some of you guys have heard this story. I don't care, I'm gonna tell it again. When Harper was 2, I had to go to a meeting that morning. So I woke up early to get her ready. And I go into her room and she's gonna be really mad that I told you guys this, but babies poop. And she had pooped and it was everywhere. Like it was on her pillow, it was on her sheets, the wall. I mean, it was just terrible. Like I went in and I was just like, this is awful. And so like I, got her all cleaned up. I was trying to get the room cleaned up. And, finally, like I was just getting the sheets and I was getting ready to leave the room. And behind me, I hear the door shut. And for some weird reason, the people that lived there before us had switched the lock around. And I heard it click. And I thought, man, this is not good. My 2-year-old just locked me in a bedroom. I'm over there, I'm like, shaking the handle and talking to her like, Harper, flip the switch. And she's just laughing. She's 2. She doesn't know what she's doing. She thinks it's hilarious. And I'm like freaking out because she could be hurting herself out there, crashing. There could be sharp objects. I don't know what she's doing out there. I'm trapped in a bedroom. I can't go out the window because it's above the garage. It's like a 15-foot drop, and I'm old. My legs would break if I tried jumping out that window. It was just, I was freaking out. I was getting claustrophobic, having a hard time breathing, and just like 15, 20 minutes in there, I'm just like talking to her, come on, turn it. She runs away laughing. And then finally, after a while, she comes back, I hear it click, and she runs off laughing again. And so I get out of the bedroom and I'm like, okay, I can still make this meeting. We just got to eat breakfast really quick. And so I'm getting her ready. And, at this time, all she communicated with was like one word at a time. And she looked at me and said, milk. I said, yeah, okay, yeah, here's some milk. And I poured her a glass of milk. And she looked at me and said, sorry, and dumped it out. That's my life, that's Harper. But yeah, that was a time in my life when I was trapped. Some of you guys, maybe you have a friend in your life where they have been, or maybe they currently are, trapped in a relationship. I mean, you guys know anybody like that? You don't have to like point at anybody, but we all kind of know somebody. Like, I had this friend one time who was like getting ready to break up with this girl. He knew it was a bad relationship, and then the girl's grandma died. And it's like, he was like, shoot, I'm at least trapped for like another 2 weeks. You can't break up with somebody when their grandma dies. So, there's relationships like that at times. Sometimes people get trapped in a relationship that's just so unhealthy. Like you look at them, they're your friend, and you try telling them all the time, this person is not good for you. This relationship is poisonous. Just leave. But the guy, let's just say it's a guy, he just keeps accepting whatever the girl does. Like she just treats him like trash. She, goes out on dates with other guys, and he just keeps, I know, yeah, that's cold-hearted. But you guys probably know people who have lived these kind of relationships out, and you're just banging your head against the wall wondering, why does he keep forgiving her? Why does he keep taking her back? Like this guy, he is not smart. But he just, no matter what she does, he's just like, it's okay. Come on, I still love you. I still care about you. Time and time again. And I think relationships like that, they're frustrating. And I want to tell you tonight that we're in this series talking about the Bible. Just kind of this grand picture, like this overview of the Bible. We're picking out different parts. I want to tell you one of the common themes of the Bible. A common theme in the Bible is Israel, God's people. They are like that cheating girlfriend. They're like that cheating wife. Like they're supposed to be married to God alone. Do you understand that? Like God chose Israel to be his people. He made a covenant with them. He said, hey, you're mine and I am your God. I will watch over you. I'll protect you. I'll take care of you. And what the Israelite people do time and time again is they turn their back on God. They keep rejecting him over and over when you read through the Old Testament. That's why don't let people tell you that the Old Testament is this old, boring, tired book. It's incredible. I mean, it's the original like teen drama story. It's like this love relationship story between God and his people. And his people keep treating him terribly, but God keeps forgiving them. God keeps saying, I still want relationship with you. And I love these stories in the Old Testament. We're going to look at Exodus tonight. If you got Bibles, you can read along. If you want to look on your phone, you can check it out. But we're going to be looking at the book of Exodus. It comes right after Genesis. And we're at this point again where Israel, God's people, they've kind of forgotten about God and things start to go bad for them. And in fact, they become slaves in Egypt. That's where they currently are right now in the book of Exodus. They're in Egypt and they become slaves for what some people believe anywhere from 230 years to 400 years. They are in slavery. Let me read you this verse here from Exodus 1 about what slavery was like in Egypt. Verse 8, eventually a new king came to power in Egypt who knew nothing about Joseph or what he had done. That was a former leader of the Israelite people. He said to his people, look, the people of Israel now outnumber us and are stronger than we are. We must make a plan to keep them from growing even more. If we don't, and if war breaks out, they will join our enemies and fight against us. Then they will escape from the country. So the Egyptians made the Israelites their slaves. They appointed brutal slave drivers over them, hoping to wear them down with crushing labor. They forced them to build the cities of Pithom and Ramses as supply centers for the king. Anywhere from 230 to 400 years they spent in slavery in Egypt under brutal slave drivers, people that wanted to break their spirits, people that wanted to destroy them, to destroy their self-worth, to destroy their identity. I think that'd be a hard way to live. I think a lot of us in today's world, like we have a hard time wrapping our minds around the evils of slavery. We feel like as a country, we're so distant from that time in our history now, but it hasn't been that long. And for the Israelite people here in this story, they're going through it. Exodus, it's an incredible book. God raises up this leader named Moses. And he says, Moses, I'm going to use you to save my people, to get them out of slavery. And Moses, he's pretty reluctant at first. I don't know if you've ever been in that situation where somebody asked you to be a leader and you didn't really want to do it, but that was Moses. God asked him to do it and he said, God, I'm slow of speech. Some people think he had a stutter, like he had a hard time talking, and he did not want to be a leader because he knew being a leader would mean he would have to talk a lot and speak in front of people, and he just didn't think he was qualified to do that. But Moses, he says, okay, God, I'll do what you're asking me to do. And he starts going to Pharaoh. He tells him, go to Pharaoh and tell him to let my people go. And he keeps going. And over, Pharaoh keeps telling him no. And you've probably heard the story before, but what does God do? He brings plagues upon the Egyptian people for not letting God's people go. Some of the plagues are water to blood. He brings, I don't know, I'm going to guess billions of frogs into the land, gnats, flies, all the livestock of the Egyptians, they all die. The Egyptians get these boils all over their bodies. Hail rains down and kills people. Locusts swarm the land. And there's one day where darkness covers everything. It's darkness that's so dark you can feel it. And then finally, the straw that breaks the camel's back, it's the last plague. The death of every firstborn son in Egypt. How many of you guys are firstborn sons out there? Yeah, me too, yeah. You got a free pass, daughters. Daughters got a free pass on this one. Firstborn sons. And Pharaoh has a son, and he loses that son. And after that, he is a broken man. He tells Moses, take your people and go. I'm done with you. But here's the part of the story I want to look at. Open up, chapter 14, verse 5. When word reached the king of Egypt that the Israelites had fled, Pharaoh and his officials changed their minds. What have we done letting all those Israelite slaves get away, they asked. So Pharaoh harnessed his chariot and called up his troops. He took with him 600 of Egypt's best chariots, along with the rest of the chariots of Egypt, each with its commander. The Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, so he chased after the people of Israel who had left with fist raised in defiance. The Egyptians chased after them with all the forces in Pharaoh's army, all his horses and chariots, his charioteers, his troops. The Egyptians caught up with the people of Israel as they were camped beside the shore near Pi Haroth, across the Baal Zephon. Those are just places in Egypt. As Pharaoh approached, the people of Israel looked up and panicked when they saw the Egyptians overtaking them. They cried out to the Lord and they said to Moses, why did you bring us out here to die in the wilderness? Weren't there enough graves for us in Egypt? What have you done to us? Why did you make us leave Egypt? Didn't we tell you this would happen while we were still in Egypt? We said, leave us alone. Let us be slaves to the Egyptians. It's better to be a slave in Egypt than a corpse in the wilderness. There's probably 2.4 million Israelites at this time. And here's the deal. They're trapped on one side by the Red Sea, and they don't have a boat. There's not enough boats for 2.4 million people. And on the other side, they can see off in the distance the Egyptian army coming at them with everything they have. And they say right there, it'd be better to go back to slavery. It'd be better to go back to our old way of life. You never should have taken us out of there. We never should have followed you. We never should have listened. It was too good to be true. And I think for so many of us, when we hear that story, because a lot of us in here, I'm guessing, you've probably seen the movie or you've heard the story at some point in your life. You know how the story ends. And you're probably looking at the Israelite people right now and you're thinking, those guys are so dumb. Like, why would they want to go back to slavery? God is going to rescue them. But that's not fair. Because for us, it's like we have the answers to the test. We know what happens next. We know the answer. But for them, they are living the test out in that moment. Will they trust God? Some of you in here, you're going through a test, you're going through a trial, and right now you're having a hard time believing that God's going to deliver you, that God will come through for you. And if you're not facing it now, you will face it, because tests and trials, hard times, they come. You can't avoid them forever. And in that moment, will you choose to still trust God? Or will you want to go back to slavery? Will you want to go back to your old way of life because that's what you've always known? I think so often with sin, when we leave sin behind to follow God, in the moment it feels great, it feels awesome. We're like, yes, I want to live my life for Jesus. But as soon as things get hard, as soon as the challenges come, we want to go back to our old way of life, just like the Israelites. We want to go back to slavery. We want to go back to the sin that we've always known, that we're comfortable with, the old way of living, because we understood that way. This new way of life, it takes trust. And trust is hard. When you're standing between the sea and an army, will you still trust God? As Pharaoh approached, the people of Israel looked up and they panicked. We said, leave us alone. Let us be slaves in Egypt. It's better to be a slave than a corpse in the wilderness. But Moses told the people, don't be afraid. Just stand still and watch the Lord rescue you today. The Egyptians you see today will never be seen again. The Lord himself will fight for you. Just stay calm. God will fight for you. Even when it doesn't feel like it, even when the darkness is surrounding you, trust that God will fight for you and God will deliver you. Whether it's in this life or the next, if you've given your life to Jesus, that is promised to you. That there is salvation, there is a rescue that is coming. When we leave this world, we're going to leave death and sickness and sin behind because of Jesus and what he's done for us. Keep trusting God. I know it's so easy to want to go back to our old way of life. Proverbs 26:11. Let me read this for you. I love this verse. Maybe you've heard it before. As a dog returns to its vomit, so a fool repeats his foolishness. You ever seen a dog throw up before? You ever seen a dog eat that throw up before? Dogs are dumb. I love dogs, but they're dumb. That's the same thing as us. When we sin and we leave it behind to give our lives to Jesus, how many of us return to that sin a week later or a month later? It doesn't take long before we're just like that dog going back to eat the vomit. Yeah, it's gross. I know, it's disgusting. But we do that. Romans 6, verse 15. Look what Paul says about slavery to sin. Well, then, since God's grace has set us free from the law, does that mean we can go on sinning? I mean, that's a fair question that people have been asking Paul at this time when he wrote this. You know, people said, oh, we're saved by grace. Jesus has saved us, so we can just go on sinning, do whatever we want so that grace may increase. And Paul says, of course not. Don't you realize that you become the slave of whatever you choose to obey? You can be a slave to sin, which leads to death, or you can choose to obey God, which leads to righteous living. Thank God. Once you were slaves of sin, but now you wholeheartedly obey this teaching we have given you. Now you are free from your slavery to sin, and you have become slaves to righteous living. I love that passage because for me, I've lived this passage out in my own life. I know that there was a time in my life when I thought, I'm going to do what I want to do. I mean, I'm going to do what I feel like doing because I don't want to be told by anyone in church or in school or my parents. I don't want to be told by any of those people or this book what to do with my life. And so I did whatever I wanted to do. I did whatever I felt like doing. And eventually I woke up one day and I realized, I don't think I can stop. And in that moment, I knew I was a slave to my sin. Some of you, you think that you're free right now and you can do whatever you want and you're invincible. That's great. But one of these days, you're going to wake up and you're going to realize you're trapped. That sin has its hold in your life and you want to escape, but there's no way you can because you are a slave to it. Some of you, you've been freed from that sin already. You're not a slave anymore, but you've been tempted to go back. Just like the Israelite people, you keep looking behind you at what's going on in your life and you keep thinking, man, what am I missing out on? Maybe I should just go back. Like a dog returns to its vomit. Don't do it. Don't go back. Tonight, I just want you guys to know. We got a girl over in Millard that has given her life to Jesus in baptism tonight. Her name is Allie. You can cheer for her. Allie, happy for you. When we make this decision, there's a lot of you in here, you've made this decision in your life. You're choosing to die to your old way of life. When you go under the water, your old life, it is put to death and you are raised new with Jesus. A new life. You're no longer a slave to sin anymore. You have the Holy Spirit living inside of you. And what he does is he walks alongside you in this world. And he helps you start to overcome the sin that you've been a slave to. That is what God does. That is how the Holy Spirit works in our lives. But there's a lot of you in here, you've made that decision in your life, but right now you feel like those Israelite people. And you are trapped between the water and the army, and you're kind of looking back and you're kind of thinking, I just want to go back to being a slave. I really liked my old life as a slave. And it's because you're having a hard time trusting the path that God has laid out ahead of you is better than the path behind you. You got to trust him. His way is better than your way. His word is better than your truth. We think we can make our own truth, we can make our own way in this world, but we know nothing. His way is better than ours. And some of you, you're thinking for the first time in your life, maybe I need to give my life to him. I want to be free from this sin. I don't want to be a slave anymore. If that's you at any of our campuses tonight, go find a youth leader, go find Adam or Jamie or one of the leaders around the room tonight and just ask them, hey, what's baptism all about? What does it mean to die to my old self and be raised new with Jesus? What does that look like to be free from my sin? It's worth it. There's going to be times where you're going to have a hard time seeing the path that God's laid out ahead of you, but trust him in those moments. Trust him that what he has planned for you is better than your old way of life. Let's pray. God, thanks for this moment to worship tonight. Thank you for this chance to just be reminded that you've called us out of slavery, you've called us out of darkness, and you've called us to new life. And God, I pray for any of us in here struggling with that idea of going back. I pray that we would put those thoughts to death tonight, that we would keep moving forward in our relationship with you, that we would keep seeking you and keep trusting you, even when it doesn't seem like it makes any sense. Even when we're being crushed and persecuted all around us by people trying to get us to turn our backs on you. God, help us to stand strong, to stand firm, knowing that your ways are better than ours and that you will deliver us. In your name we pray, Father. Amen.